Hello, and welcome back to the Hello Velocity podcast, where we help corporate women level up without burning out. I'm your host, Brittany Canaski, a leadership coach and trainer here at Hello Velocity, and I cannot believe that we are already at the last episode of season 2. These seasons seem to be flying by already, and they're so fun to put together. And this season has been especially fun, bringing on guests for the first time and having really deep, interesting conversations with a lot of friends and peers that are also focused on helping women with their confidence. I do have another confidence-related topic for us to dig into a little bit later today, but first I wanted to give a quick overview of all the different topics that we covered this season and how they each related to confidence. So first we talked about your relationship to confidence, how it makes you feel, and which parts of your life you want to have more confidence, and helping you start to recognize the different needs that you have when it comes to confidence. Then we spoke with Nicole Anderson, or Career Coach Nicole, about confidence during negotiations in your career transitions. So this could be negotiating a new job and that new salary, maybe an internal promotion or some sort of change internally. And then also severance packages. So if you're being laid off, that is something you can also negotiate. That was a really great conversation to learn different skills and have this interesting perspective from a career coach who has both the individual recruiter side, but then also the corporate recruiter experience. So she can speak to both parties involved in negotiating, which is really, really helpful. Then I talked about how to be more confident working in male-dominated industries and workplaces and fields, which a lot of industries and fields still are male-dominated. So I think most of us women have experienced to some degree working in this type of environment and recognizing that this environment may not have been built for you or how you work, but learning to recognize what that can look like and what you can do about it. Then episode 4 this season, we brought on Mariana Swallow, who is a communication and public speaking coach. And we talked about confidence in public speaking and communicating at work, whether it's giving presentations, leading meetings, or just having conversations with people who may be at a higher level than you, and that may cause some nervousness or anxiety for you, and how to work through that, and what is a realistic amount of time to prepare for these different types of scenarios, because that's another thing I see people getting hung up on, is either over-preparing or under-preparing. Then episode 5, I doubled down on this theme of communicating with confidence and dug into a bunch of really easy, quick tips when it comes to confidence, things that maybe you've heard before, maybe you haven't heard before, but really impact how you show up in the workplace and how your message is getting across to other people. So a lot of it was how to be more mindful in your communication, your messaging, but also your body language. Then episode 6, we talked with Charlotte Berry about communicating across generations with confidence and had this really interesting conversation about how we can lack confidence on both sides of the generation spectrum, or really all ends of the generational spectrum, when it comes to communicating with other generations, and how there are a lot of barriers that we're putting up on our own internally and mentally. And she gave a lot of great techniques for how to bring those walls down, how to communicate better with people from different generations, but also how to connect better. And that it's, honestly, it's really not that scary. It's not that hard. And we have a lot more in common than you might think. Next was episode 7, where I talked about different mindsets that are typically holding back your confidence. These are typically rooted in some sort of fear, like fear of failure, fear of success, or we have just different beliefs about confidence, like thinking you might be conceited if you have confidence, or negative beliefs about bragging or having imposter syndrome. Then episode 8, we talked about Lisa Spear, who's a business and personal branding expert. And we had an awesome conversation about how your personal style can impact your confidence. And it's something I think, I don't know, we don't talk about too often, but it's something that impacts your daily thoughts, your daily energy, your daily confidence. And honestly, I think when you start to hone in more on your personal style, like Lisa and I talked about, it can really reduce how much time you have to think about your personal style and getting dressed in the morning and getting ready for the day, so that whatever you grab from your closet, you're going to feel great in, and you're going to show up with that extra level of confidence. So it can be a really big daily game changer for you. So it's one of those that sounds really small, but when you think about it, it can add up every single day and make a big difference. Then episode 9, we talked about building an intentional community to support your confidence and have people in your corner, have people there who can support you and build up your confidence, and thinking about the relationships you have with other people around you and how that may impact your confidence, like jealousy and being competitive. Then episode 10, we talked with Morgan Hamer about manifesting success and internal confidence and how your external environment is typically based on your subconscious and internal beliefs, and that by working through some of that deeper inner work, we can start to make those shifts externally and show up with more confidence and start to see amazing results through that. And then lastly, just last week, we talked with Megan Grant about traveling with confidence, whether it's traveling on your own, doing some solo trips, or in groups of other women, and how powerful travel is for our own confidence, where it can really test you, it can really push you to your outer limits of confidence. And I know it's done that for me a ton, and over time, it can really create this beautiful space and time for you to invest and learn about other cultures, meet new people, and become more confident in yourself because you did something scary. So clearly we covered confidence from so many different angles. I probably didn't even expect that there would be this many different angles when I first started planning for the season, but I'm so glad we were able to look at it from all these different angles, perspectives, opinions, and bring in a lot of these different experts who could give you specific tips, next steps, and even just things to think about when it comes to your confidence. And I hope a lot of these topics are things that you can come back to again in the future, because our confidence is something that's going to ebb and flow based on the different seasons in our lives. And I think some of these may come back around to be more relevant again in the future based on what you're working through, or maybe you're going to do more presentations at work, or maybe you're going to start investing in more travel. You may want to revisit some of these episodes in the future. And as I was thinking about our final episode for season 2 and confidence, and looking back at all these topics we've already talked about, all these amazing perspectives we've covered, I was thinking about what's left, what's missing, what haven't really we talked about when it comes to confidence. And also thinking about the time of year right now is right before the holiday season. And when it comes to confidence, there are these 2 key skills that we've maybe touched on in some of these episodes before, but I think it's worth diving even deeper and giving them their own episode and own dedicated space to talk through, because they're so important. And especially this time of year, we are going to need these skills even more now. And these 2 skills are, first, how to say no, and secondly, how to ask for support. And I think these are needed especially right now during the holiday season, because everyone gets typically very stressed during this holiday season. We have a lot of extra obligations on our plate, a lot of personal errands and obligations, parties, hosting duties, all these things that we're taking on. And then also for some people, their professional work may be picking up as well. So it can be a lot on our plate all at the same time. And both of these skills really require you to have confidence in yourself and the people around you in order to get what you want accomplished. And honestly, sometimes when we're this stressed and we have this much on our plate, it can just feel hard to be confident in ourselves because we might just be simply overwhelmed. We might also just be burnt out from a busy year and taking on more and more and more at work, or the stress of world events and constant news happening that feels draining. So I want to talk through how these 2 skills can be really supportive for you during this time if you're very intentional about them and don't let the stress take over these next few months. First is how to say no, and this requires that confidence in yourself to know what you need to say no to be able to say no, and then to trust the other people that you're saying it to not get mad at you for saying no, and to trust them to handle you saying no and not make it mean anything negative about you. So a few different angles I want to talk about when it comes to how to say no. First and foremost, I think a great reminder here is that most of the time, no can be a complete sentence. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to have this long, drawn-out spiel of, this is why I have to say no, and I'm so sorry, and apologizing, and blah, 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 all these things. And again, this energy I know is just coming from a really stressful place. People tend to do that, and we, again, don't want people to be mad at us. We don't want to feel bad about ourselves or feel guilty about saying no. But sometimes no is just no. And we, again, need to trust other people to be responsible for their emotions and to handle that with grace as well. And a lot of times I think it's hard for us to say no because we're constantly, honestly, like keeping score in relationships. Like, oh, I need to do this nice thing for this person because they did this nice thing for me. Or, oh, it's the holiday season. I have to go above and beyond and do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. We're always keeping track and keeping score of the things we need to be doing and saying yes to, as if there's some justification, again, going back to that. But every time you are justifying these things and keeping score in relationships, that just means that you're making that relationship conditional. It's essentially communicating that if I don't do this, that person won't like me. If I don't do this, that person won't love me. And that, in its essence, is making that relationship conditional or making love conditional. And I'm sure most of us have heard the saying that we want love to be unconditional, right? We want people to love us, to like us, to respect us, no matter where we're coming from. And obviously we want to come from a place of positive intent and care and affection. And we just need to know what our limits are personally in order to know what to say no to. So that's a key piece I want to cover with you today, is knowing what your limits are personally so that you know when to say no, and you can do it from still a loving, supportive place. And yes, you can explain if that makes sense. Sometimes a no is a no, and that's all you need to say. Sometimes you may need to or want to explain or give some context behind it and offer maybe a different solution as well. So we'll cover this personally first, and then we'll kind of regroup and talk about professionally as well. So when it comes to knowing your limits personally and when to say no, I like to think about my capacity. That's usually one key place that I look first. And your capacity doesn't only mean, do you have time on your schedule to do this thing? I think that's usually the easiest place to look and the knee-jerk reaction. But it honestly took me a very long time to realize that there's a lot more that goes into my capacity and most people's capacity besides just time. For me, there's also the emotional, mental, and physical capacity that could go into it. So I've learned, for me, even on the weekends, I can't commit to more than 2 social outings in the weekend usually, because I'm very much an introvert. I need my downtime on the weekend. I need some alone time to recharge. And as much as I love getting together with friends and family and doing all these things out and about, usually if I do more than 2, it takes up too much of my weekend. I don't get enough of that downtime to recharge and rest in order to increase my capacity for the rest of the week. And then thinking about emotionally and mentally, sometimes we do get drained, and that could mean that we won't show up as our best, or we won't be able to do our best work, or we won't be that fun if we do say yes and come hang out with our friends. So think about your capacity from those different angles as well, and not just having the time available on your schedule. Another place to look for your limits personally is, does it align with my values? Or essentially, is it in integrity with me to say yes to this? Because sometimes it's simply a no because of that. And again, you likely don't have to justify that to someone else. Just say, no, that's not something I'm interested in. That's fine. Again, you don't have to overly explain a lot of times. You don't have to go above and beyond. You can just say, no, I'm not interested. And then lastly, another gut check I like to do myself, and me and my friends do this a lot, and we'll talk about this a lot, is saying, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And this is one of those when it just doesn't feel right. Whatever the opportunity, the invitation is, something's just not clicking for you, and maybe you can't quite put words to it. But if it's not a hell yes, then usually you're forcing yourself to do it. And a lot of times, again, we're kind of worse off if we commit to something that we don't really want to be committed to. So that's another kind of gut check for you to think about when it comes to needing to say no in different situations. On the professional side, I see a lot of people struggle to say no because it's just simply not normalized. There's not a lot of people who actually do say no and can do it with respect and communicate it clearly and directly. And I think we're scared to do it, honestly. I think a lot of people are scared. This happens to me a lot, where people will reach out to me to work with me, and they'll say yes on a call, or they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so interested. And then they completely ghost me. They disappear. They just never say no. And honestly, on my perspective, I would much rather just have you say no. And then it just sort of closes the loop. It closes the door on that. And I know where we landed it. Instead, I feel like when we ghost people or when we're indirect, when we beat around the bush or we say things around the truth of saying no, but without actually saying no, I think we're just always like leaving that window open or leaving that door open of ambiguity, and it can just cause more unnecessary energy spent around it for either party or both. And a lot of times it's more respectful just to say no, and you can do it in a respectful way. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to mean they're not going to like you. It doesn't mean I'm going to be mad at you that you don't want to work with me. No, I totally understand and respect your decision. And yeah, tell me what's true. And the other side I see a lot when it comes to women, especially, is that when we don't say no, you have to remember that people will treat you how you let them treat you. So if you're always the one to say yes and you always get everything done, but you're working late hours and you're stressing yourself out to keep up with this, then people are going to keep asking you to help and keep asking you to take on more because you never said no. And maybe they're not seeing that you're working late, and maybe they're not seeing all this effort that's going into it and how stressed you are. So they just know that you're reliable, they know you're getting it done, so they're going to keep asking you. So no is a great way to express your boundaries, to know your limits, and be able to communicate that with someone else. So when it comes to knowing your limits professionally and how to communicate them, there's a few areas that I typically see that you can look for in ways to easily be able to communicate this and saying no in different requests and opportunities that might come your way. So like the example we were just talking about, when people keep asking more and more from you, there are typically two ways you could probably go about this. Is that sometimes it genuinely isn't your job and it's someone else's responsibility, but that person maybe didn't hold up their end of the bargain, they're not as good at it as you, so the person requesting it keeps coming back to you instead. This is something you need to shut down as quickly as possible. Just because you're doing it better than the other person doesn't mean that you should be the one responsible for this if it's not actually your job, especially. And it's a way that you can say no and redirect them to the person who is responsible for it. And sure, you might get some pushback, but you can be prepared to handle that and prepared to handle those objections. And they might say, well, you're better at it than that person. Well, then what does that person need to get better at it? Or what skills, what capabilities are they missing? What do they need to learn in order to get to the place that they need to be to do their job and complete their responsibilities? And again, that doesn't mean it's on your shoulders to train them. Maybe it is, depending on the dynamics and the roles. But think about how you can communicate no, redirect to the other person, and say, hey, actually, this is something that's so-and-so's job. This should be on their plate. I know I've done this in the past, but I can no longer take on these projects due to my own roles and responsibilities and my current capacity. Something like that. Just state the facts. This is not what I'm responsible for. I have all these other things that I'm working on that are priority, that I'm focused on, and this should really be this person's responsibility. Another angle I see in this type of situation is that sometimes you're being asked to do something that's completely out of your area of expertise. So it's something maybe brand new to the team, or it's something that maybe your boss or leader is really excited about and something brand new they have to try, and they put this brand new type of project or responsibility on your plate, and it's something you've never dealt with. It's completely out of your wheelhouse, and it's something you don't feel comfortable doing. This is another great opportunity for you to push back and say no if you don't feel comfortable doing it, and especially if you don't have the capacity to do it, or if you don't have the capacity to learn how to do it, or again, if it doesn't make sense for your specific job. So very similar to the last example, I always recommend sticking to the facts so it's not an emotional-based decision when you're communicating it back to them, but say, hey, my focus areas are these three priorities based on what we've talked about, or based on the goals of our team, based on the goals of my team, my role specifically. And this project would require X number of hours of learning and development for me to get up to speed to be able to do it. And currently I don't have that capacity, or maybe that would make more sense for this person over here who already knows maybe 50% of it, where I would be starting from scratch or something like that. But try to think about the facts and how to redirect them maybe to someone else or redirect them to a different solution. Like maybe, hey, now is not the time to take on this new project when we have this big client deliverable coming up in 2 weeks. Can we revisit it in Q1 and see who would have capacity to work on this? And then an overarching place to look when it comes to knowing your limits professionally is always understanding what your capacity is. Similar to what we talked about personally, think about this from a work perspective, and we want this to be a bit more objective and fact-based as much as we can. So think about what your schedule and capacity limits are when it comes to maybe your number of clients that you're working with or your hours worked, billable hours, however you measure your type of work. Think about what your limit is. And a lot of times with my clients, we have like an ideal schedule that we talk through. We have a minimum, like bare minimum. If I'm sick, if I'm not feeling well, if something is taking over my life personally and I don't have as much time for work, here's my minimum schedule. But then also, what's that max limit? Because sometimes we do have these short-term projects that come up or urgent things that we have to address, and sometimes we are stretched a bit more thin in our work. So we need to have that limit, though, of when is too much? What is too much? Is it if you've worked past 5 p.m. 4 nights this week? Is it you've been working weekends 2 weeks in a row? Like, what are those numbers? And again, make it fact-based so that it's something you can communicate it back to the person who's requesting something new to say, hey, actually, I can't take on anything new right now. I have these 4 other client deliverables due in the next 2 weeks. I've already been working late in the last 2 weeks, and I expect I will in the next week. I really don't have capacity to take on any more. Can you please reach out to someone else on the team, or is your deliverable or is your deadline able to be pushed back? So our no's when it comes to the professional side do have more nuances because typically it's not just a no period, like it can be more in personal situations. But we do want to state the facts, and then we want to be solution oriented. So even if it is a no from us that we can't take this project on or this new opportunity on, I want you to offer some other solution of either pushing back on their deadline, offering them to look for someone else to support whatever this initiative is, or a different type of solution to what they're asking for. If they want this big, elaborate deliverable and say, hey, that's just not possible right now, this is our busiest time of year, maybe you are negotiating back with a smaller deliverable. Here's what I can do in the next week if you need something in a pinch. But I can't do this big thing, I can do this little thing, and that can be our solution instead. So you can probably see now all these different ways to communicate no is a way for you to exude your confidence, to know what your limits are, what you will and will not take on, but then also confidently coming up with new ideas, new solutions, and coming to the table like a leader, like the leader that you are, and saying, hey, I know this doesn't quite fit what you're asking for. Here's something different that we can do together. It's really taking more ownership over what you're working on, what you're committing to personally and professionally, so that you are committing to what makes most sense for you as an individual, not just what's happening to you, what people are asking of you. And I think a lot of us kind of fall into that autopilot where we just say yes, we take on more and more things, we do what everyone else around us wants us to do, and then we kind of forget what's most important to us, or we forget our boundaries and we step over our own boundaries because we're not saying no. So this is a really powerful skill to have, is saying no and learning to understand what those limits are and communicating those to other people. All right, the next skill I want us to talk about today when it comes to confidence is how to ask for support. It does require confidence in yourself to be able to ask for support, because you're also then wanting to trust the other person that they won't make it mean anything about you that you've asked for support. And I think that's where a lot of us get hung up in our head about asking for support, is we have this fear or worry that other people are going to think we're not good enough, or, oh, I couldn't do it all on my own, I had to ask for help. We kind of make it mean negative things to ask for help, that we're not good enough to do it on our own, or that we're inconveniencing someone else to ask for help, or we took on too much and now we regret it, or we feel guilty about it. So first of all, let's start to reframe asking for support as a really powerful, positive thing, because it gives you an opportunity to connect with someone else, first of all, it gives you an opportunity to get support, right? It can be hard for us to ask for support, but how amazing does it feel to get that support from someone else, personally or professionally, when you're in a bind, you're really stressed, you're overwhelmed, and then someone is able to take something off your plate? That feels so good. Why can't we enjoy it? Why do we have to beat ourselves up for asking for that help? So, if nothing else from today, I want you to think about normalizing asking for support. And some ways to make it easier on you and the other people involved is first trying to identify what those pain points are that you would need the most support in. So, personally, again, thinking about the holidays coming up, is it that you're always taking on so much of the cooking when it comes to family holiday get togethers, and it's actually a ton of work and a lot of, running to the grocery store, a lot of setup time, a lot of cooking time, and you're actually not getting time with family because you're in the kitchen all day the day before and the day of the holiday? So is that a pain point for you? Are you overcommitted and running around to too many different events around the holidays? And then professionally, think about it that way too. Are there certain projects that have you overextended, or certain clients that are taking up more of your time than maybe was expected and something needs to change there? So start to get really specific at what is causing maybe the overwhelm or the stress, the anxiety. Start to pinpoint it as much as you can. And then start to think about who are the people that can support you. Who would be best to reach out to when it comes to, again, the personal example about family holidays? Who loves to cook in the family? Who would be happy to jump in and help you or take on more of those responsibilities? Or is there someone who would love to pick up a delicious pie from a local bakery instead of you spending hours baking it yourself, and they have a favorite bakery that they go to and can get something really special that feels really amazing and would be really fun to have for the family? And then on your team, when it comes to the professional stress and asking for support, who on your team maybe also has a relationship with that client that's overextending you? Who else has knowledge about that project that can step in, and in what area? So we want to think about what kind of help we need, who can help us, and then third is what they can do to support us. And you'll often find that most of the time people want to help us and want to help other people in general, but a lot of times we just don't know what that looks like. We don't know what would be really helpful for you. We're waiting for you to ask us or to give us some specific direction. So I want you to, as much as you can, and if it makes sense for you, think through what kind of support would be helpful for you in these different situations and be specific if you can. Or honestly, it's just opening and inviting them to support and say, hey, I'm really overwhelmed on this client project. They keep emailing me every day with new requests. What do you think we can do differently? Or is there something you can think of that I'm not thinking about that we can do? Or, hey, what do you think about changing this so that you're more involved? How could you help? What could you do? Anything like that. Open-ended questions. Get other people involved. Get their ideas if you don't have something really specific. Because sometimes you'll find that you may think you have all the answers, but really when we brainstorm with other people, we can get a lot further than we can staying in our own head and being too specific on our own. And I find this topic so important because so many of my clients have struggled to see that they don't ask for support when they are in the thick of it. So they'll come on a coaching call, they'll be so stressed, so frazzled, so worn out, and they said, oh, I have this to do, this personally. I have all these professional deadlines, all these things happening at once, and I'm so stressed. And then I say, okay, so who can support you? And they stop and think like, I hadn't even thought about that, right? So where are you doing that to yourself? Where are you overrunning yourself? Where are you stressed out and you're not asking for support? You think you have to take it all on yourself. So this is your permission slip to ask for support. It can be a wonderful, positive experience. It doesn't have to mean anything negative about you. And I guarantee you will need it in these next few months. Okay, that is it for today's episode, our last episode of season 2. I'm still planning out a few different ideas. I have a ton of ideas for the next few seasons, so I'm still finalizing season 3, but it looks like it'll likely be coming out in March. So we'll have the next few months off from regularly scheduled podcasts, but you can follow along on YouTube where I'll be posting other videos like different trainings and some more guided meditations for you in the meantime. And if you have any specific ideas of topics you want covered or people you think would be great for me to interview, definitely send me an email. All my contact info is in the show notes. And yeah, keep in touch. Let me know what else you're working on, what else you've been thinking about when it comes to confidence over these last few months. And I hope you can take these learnings with you over the next few months and have a great holiday season. And that's it for today. We'll see you in season 3.